Hi, I put together this tutorial because I don't think there's a complete video on YouTube on how to cut cabochons. So I thought I'd teach the technique as taught to me by the searchers of Anaheim. But first, you're gonna find a suitable piece of material, preferably something without any cracks in it. Inspect your material very well before you purchase it. Any kind of crack, no matter how small it is, can potentially give you problems as it's vibrating on the coarser grit wheels. It has the potential to fall apart on you, and you don't want that to happen after you've spent so much time, making your cabochon just to have it fall apart in the middle of what you're doing. Um, so basically, you're gonna want to get like some kind of a template, or you can even draw freeform, um, and trace the template onto your piece of material. That's going to be the back of your cabochon. For this demonstration, I picked a large oval shape. The material is seraphinite, which is kind of a softer fibrous material. Now I'm going to cut it on the trim saw. You don't want to cut it too close because just in case the material starts to fall apart or your cut is a little too hard, um, it won't break off into the line. That line is set there so you don't cut into that line. That's your stopping point. So I'm cutting pretty close, but not, super close to the line. You're gonna get closer on the grinding wheel. I probably shouldn't have grinded on the first wheel because it has a tendency to be too coarse and it creates a lot of vibration. So that vibration can damage your rock. Um, yeah. Generally, I mostly do cuts on the second wheel because it's got a finer grain, and the finer grain keeps the rock, um, it keeps it together a little bit more because the grains are smaller and the granules don't fall apart as easy. So basically, now I'm on the second wheel. I'm tightening up my edge. I like to leave like about a millimeter or two of wiggle room from the edge because as I move up on the wheels, I'm gonna get closer and closer to the edge. If I took it to the edge, then I would begin to cut inside of the line as I moved up the wheels. So basically, that little device I'm using is creating a 15-degree angle all the way around the cabochon. So I'm placing the cabochon with the back end up. The back end is the end that you traced the pattern onto. So I'm grinding all the way around. Make sure you're thorough and you grind that 15-degree line all the way till it meets the top. And then after you're going to inspect it, you should see the same 15-degree line all the way around the cabochon. Make sure it meets to that horizontal flat top evenly all the way around. That 15-degree line will be where your bezel wire hangs onto. When you cut on round wheels, it creates like a round indentation on the side of the cabochon. So you're going to want to eliminate that by holding your cabochon sideways with the wheel. So using the flat part of the wheel, you're going to take out that indentation. If you left that indentation, it would make it harder to polish those spots because the wheel can't get inside those crevices. It's not making that point of contact with that inside curve. So that's why you grind it away. Also, a thing you should know when you're cutting cabochons, when you make sharp corners on stone, those sharp corners, although it looks neat, it just, the corners are the weakest part of the stone. So anytime you tap on that corner, it has a potential to break at that point. So basically, you want to round off any kind of sharp corners. Um, that spot on the bottom, I believe it's called a chamfer. You're going to want to grind it against the wheels just to make that sharp edge a little softer and more rounded. So that's what I'm doing at this step. That and kind of grinding the side of the cabochon flat, a little more flat. So after this point, I'm turning on the dop wax so it can melt and we can stick a dop stick on there. I always use dop sticks. My technique isn't that great yet to where I don't need a dop stick, but I like the results that I get using a dop stick. So basically now you want to measure the height of your bezel wire. The bezel wire is a piece of silver or whatever kind of metal you want to use that is used to hold the cabochon in whatever setting you're putting it in, whether you want to make a pendant or whatever you want to do with it. So I take the height of the bezel wire and I transfer that height onto the side of the cabochon with a high visibility metallic marker. I like metallic markers because you can see them pretty well when the light's reflecting off of it. You usually have like water and slurry from the stone running over your lines, so you can't really see it very well. So that's why I use those metallic markers. And it kind of grinds off pretty easily. Those Sharpie markers, they have a tendency to kind of stain the marker, or stain the cabochon, I mean. At this point, you divide the top of the cabochon into thirds, an equal distance from the outer perimeter. Just trace, trace your pattern an equal distance from the outside, usually in thirds. That's what it should look like. I have that spot in the middle of the cabochon. That's going to be my highest spot. That'll be the last point that I grind away. So now I'm going to only grind the area from the top outside line to the line on the side of the cabochon. Only grind that area. Don't go past the line on the side and don't go past the line on the outer, don't go past the outer ring on the top of the cabochon. So I'm going to grind away the material with the cabochon facing the wheel directly. That's how I get a uniform straight line all the way across the side of the cabochon. When I first started grinding like this, I would first do like the cardinal points, like dividing the stone into four. But now I kind of like use this technique where I kind of rotate it like that. But keep an eye on what you're grinding away. Half the time that you spend doing a cabochon is grinding. The other half is inspecting what you're grinding. You don't want to grind away too much because you can't bring back anything that you ground away. Once it's ground, that's it. So I'm making sure I stay within those lines. It's kind of creating that curve, the initial curve. Right now I'm just feathering it on the second grinding wheel just to take off any high spots. A technique you have to learn when doing cabochon is kind of having like a hard stopping point with your hands. Um, just kind of set your hands down and then just rotate your fingers, and that's kind of like a hard stopping um, device that you can make with your hands. I'm not moving my shoulders, so my hands can't go past that point if I don't pick up my shoulders. So I'm just using my fingers to kind of create that radius. So now I'm on the third wheel. Don't forget to grind the sides of the stone. You don't have to spend a lot of time doing it, just maybe one or two rotations will work. You don't want to neglect these spots, even though they're covered by the bezel wire. It's good practice to grind them as you're going up the wheels. That way you don't have to go back to it. I used to leave them when I first started doing cabochons, but then I'd have to go back and do them after I was done polishing because it's just good practice and it shows professionalism, and you get a good cab instead of hiding your mistakes. It's just good practice to do your best job. And it's easier to sell them to customers when it's not all janky looking on the sides. So I'm barely feathering it on the third wheel. Um, I'm doing that motion using that hard stop technique, um, just to get out any high spots or any irregularities. So basically, at this point, we're starting our pre-polish. At this point, all your scratches should be pretty invisible. If not, if you see any scratches, take your time on this wheel. It does take off quite a bit of material still, even though it's a pre-polish. But if you leave it on the wheel for a long time, you will get a flat spot in that area. So just mind your grind. And with this kind of pattern that I've kind of developed, it's kind of hard to explain. So I kind of made a way to explain it. But imagine your cabochon is kind of like a flower, and the center of the flower is going to be the center of your cabochon. That's where you're going to grind the least. That's like your starting point. And I kind of do like this radial grind with the grind kind of relative to like the petals of the flower. So you start from that highest spot and then kind of like in a rocking motion, kind of rock the cabochon back and forth, and that rocking motion will kind of like lead you to any kind of like high spots on your cabochon, and also use your finger to feel for any high spots on your cabochon. Don't forget to polish the sides. At this point, your cab should be fairly smooth. Turn your cabochon sideways and look at it and study it to see if your curve is a little lopsided or anything, or there's high spots. You want to take those out. At this point, you should have all scratches out. If you see any scratches, you didn't do a good enough job on the previous wheel, and so you should take it back down to the previous wheel. Just lightly feathering. You want it to feel pretty buttery smooth on the polishing wheels. If it's not, and you get to some spots with some drag, just polish it out. You want the whole surface to be really smooth and real buttery when you're grinding it on the polishing wheel. So at this point, it's pretty much done. You're going to want to take it to the final polish wheel. It should be pretty shiny at this point. Shouldn't have any scratches. Look at it sideways, rotate it, look at it sideways, and if you see an ununiform curve, you're going to want to fix that. you don't want to spend too much time on any wheel. If you're taking like a really, really long time on a wheel, either take it back down to the previous wheel, or you can spend all day on that wheel. So I'm polishing it, using my finger to feel for any spots that I missed. Rocking it back and forth, gently feathering it, not putting any pressure on it. If you put pressure on it, especially on a softer stone, you will create flat spots and you will get orange peel. So inspect thoroughly and you're pretty much done. You can polish it some more, but it's up to you. And check the sides to see if your curve is nice and uniform and gradual the way you want it. And basically that is how I cut a cabochon. I hope this tutorial was informative, and I hope it taught you something. Thank you for checking it out.